straight at him and told him to say it to his face. A little while earlier, Chris was scared, asking if he was really considering visiting those guys. He had warned that it was a suicidal act, as the Barkos wouldn't let him lead alive. However, Roman asked how he thought the relationship between him and Barko would end now. Chris says that in the current situation, he's a mortal enemy, and that's why he thinks the best option is for them to avoid each other. But Roman simply disagrees. They were the ones who started this, and that's why Dimitri has to see this through to the end to find out what will happen, especially since it's clear that the Barkos have always had something against him. And that's why, in his extremely critical moment, it's the perfect chance to understand the root of this vendetta. He says he'll go alone, but Chris isn't keen on letting that happen. However, back in the room, he asks what's going on in that meeting. Barko is already seething, wanting to know how the damn kid dares to come there and ignore the difference in status between them. He then tells Roman that since he doesn't understand aristocratic laws, he'll explain. Interfering in a war without cause was not allowed in the kingdom of Chiron, and he warns that no noble from the northern region would let this slide for free. But Roman then asks if he's done talking, and says it's time to explain his cause. He says that the Lawrences and Dimitris were planning to unite through a marriage, but now he is seen as a fool. That's why he wants to ask everyone why they think he broke off that marriage. Some thought it was for reputation or because he wanted other women. However, none of those rumors are true. The reason he did it is because he was threatened by the eldest son of the Barkos, Anthony. The father stands up and Roman says it happened at a social gathering. At that time, he was invited because he was close to Anthony Barko and fell into a trap. They put something in his drink, and when he woke up, he was next to the Barko girl. And Anthony used that as a threat to cancel the marriage with Miss Lawrence. It was clearly a trap by the Barkos to separate these two families. The other nobles of the northern region begin to murmur. And for Roman, the best way to deal with the weakness is by exposing it. However, the Baron yells, asking who would believe something so nonsensical. Everyone already knows what piece of trash he was, and for him to keep trying to hide that was disgusting. But our guy just smiles and says he knew he would say that. And that's why he also has one more reason for interfering in the war against the Lawrences. The father asks what else he had to say, and then Roman says that Dimitri went too far by molesting his fiancée. Because of the trauma and shock this caused, she decided to call off the wedding. And he then says if the man wants to confirm this, he can just talk to Flora Lawrence herself. Roman thinks that since everything was set up with a lie, it's with another lie that he will also get out of it. He mourns that's why he participated in the war only with his personal guard to avoid involving his family. He then opens his arms and asks everyone in the room, do they really think that wasn't reason enough to have interfered in the war? With that, no one would stay loyal to the Barkos anymore. The Baron already knew that in this situation, there was no way he could prove anything. He at least needed to buy a little more time. The goal was to get out of this situation and look for another solution. He sits down and says that he doesn't believe those words to be true, so they would confirm that later. For now, the boy could leave. However, our guy calls for the discount, and warns that the man has two options. The first is to punish Anthony Barko for everything he's done, or the second option is for this whole problem to turn into a dispute between the two families. He was giving him the chance to make the choice here and now, and none of this would be revealed to his father. Now the poor guy is completely terrified. He knows they need to avoid a war with the Dimitri family at all costs. The family was already weakened, and something like this happening would be akin to extermination. The damn bastard hadn't left any way out. He then tells Roman that this problem didn't need to involve both families, and that's why he would ask Anthony to apologize on his knees. However, our guy doesn't stop and asks when he said he wanted Anthony to kneel. The poor father doesn't know what to do anymore. But Dimitri says that in no law does the person who commits the crime choose the punishment. It was he who would decide what Anthony's punishment would be. Sometime later, someone yells for the father's name. He apologizes. While Anthony on his knees asks what this business about a trial duel is, he cries desperately, saying it's impossible for that bastard to let him walk away alive. He begs his father to refuse, but the man yells at him to get a grip. He was the eldest son of the Barko family, and that's why his life was tied to the family. He had to face reality and be ready to at least lose an arm. With that, he drops Anthony to the ground, defeated. Anthony could only think about our bad boy while begging his father for forgiveness. Then the scene shifts to the day of the duel, with them facing each other on the battlefield. The damn Anthony is trembling all over while holding the sword. He apologizes to saying he really liked Flora, and that's why he lost his mind when he found out they were getting married. And he was there to apologize for everything he had done. Our guy starts drawing his sword as Anthony begs, saying he had no bad intentions. But our guy doesn't respond. He keeps screaming Roman's name. He calls him Master Roman and begs him to please spare his life. If he did, he swore he'd be indebted for the rest of his life. The other nobles found it ridiculous, while the father realized that it was destroying the family's reputation. Roman comments on this business about the rest of his life, and asks how he would do that since he could no longer take money from the gold bank. Besides, after all this, they must have lost their connections with the central government. Regardless of what happened there, the Barko family had already met its end. He wanted to know why he should have mercy on someone who set such a cursed trap just to ruin him. At that moment, the father realizes what's coming, and man, he takes a blow to the stomach. Roman says he has no reason to do this. Dan, my son, this duel was a little more than the father expected, just a little bit. To the bad luck of those guys, Baek, who always lived with his brothers, was constantly attacked by them and had to kill them. A guy on the roof says he probably hasn't realized yet. The problem is that he didn't know how to give them a little. The moment he saw someone as an enemy, he made sure the person went straight to destruction. He had no tolerance for enemies, which would eventually make him provoke the wrong person in the future. The protagonist thinks that the older brother is really incredible. Not only was he powerful, but he had the tolerance to forgive people. He could accept others beside him once he defeated them. But he tells his brother that his path in life will be to eliminate anyone who is hostile. That's how he survived the demon cult cave, and that's how he will keep living. For him was the only way to get rid of any variables. Now Anthony Barco is dead, and this wasn't the outcome any of the nobles expected. The father runs in desperation. But man, I think that boy has already gone to the other world. He picks up his son in his arms and starts going mad. Roman then asks what the problem is. A criminal dying in a trial duel was a common occurrence. The father then screams desperately, telling everyone to kill Roman right away. However, the knights are all trembling. Seeing the monster, they don't have the courage to do anything right. The father then says that now he understands why he came alone. From the start, he was planning to do this and pretended to be innocent, which is why he didn't bring anyone. However, Roman just says that the moment Anthony threatened him, he could no longer allow them to live under the same sky. And that's why he decided to do it. And he warns that any family that stays loyal to the Barcos will have to face him directly. The father, desperate, asks if he really believes he can walk away unscathed from this. But Roman says that saying that is unnecessary. He was going to stay close to the Barco family from now on until he was sure they wouldn't rise again. But for now, he asked permission to leave. At that moment, the father realized they had messed with someone they shouldn't have. A few days passed. Viscount Barco didn't have the money to pay the bank, so he tried to escape at midnight. However, he was found dead on an unknown mountain, and with that, the Barco family, which had recently influenced the north, came to an end. The scene shifts to Han asking the young master why he was returning like that in the middle of the night. Covered in blood, he says that the moon was shining, and he had just gone for a walk. The butler stays silent for a few seconds, and says that lately, everyone's been worried. Even though he had achieved great things, he kept putting himself in great danger. He too was starting to feel anxious and asked the boy to be more cautious. However, Roman simply says that he had already warned him and asks if Han is one of his people. Han replies that he is. Then our boy says that there's nothing for him to worry about. Baek had collected enough blood in his life to fill an ocean. But the rule he followed that allowed him to become the celestial demon was to protect anyone under his command. One person at his side was more important than thousands of enemies. He then tells Han that he will always prevent any danger from falling upon his people. While the Barco family was wiped out, the Dimitri family was having a little social gathering. A woman named Helena Meluk says that not long ago, everyone was licking the Barco family's boots. But from now on, the Dimitri family would be at the center of the northern region. It was the perfect chance for the Meluk family to start forming relationships. She then looks to the side and says she had been waiting for her. It's Rihanna from the Dimitri family, and the other woman says she's even more beautiful now. She says that the social gathering had been prepared just for her. Rihanna Dimitri was the wife of Baron Dimitri. Her role was to interact with other nobles to create stronger connections between families. She was a crucial piece since the Baron didn't understand politics, but she was talented. She then thanks everyone for attending the gathering, and says she did it because she wanted the people of the north to start getting to know each other better. Of course, she did very well, and not everyone thought things would head in that direction. This was a subtle way for her to criticize those who had sided with the Barcos. However, by showing a little generosity and accepting that they joined this side. During a tea gathering, a woman asks what Rihanna thinks of Veronica. Apparently, the woman was already selling her daughter, saying she'd be perfect beside Roman. He was already 25, so it was time for him to start procreating. Otherwise, he wouldn't have children in the future. She wasn't saying this just because it was her daughter, but because she thought they matched very well. However, another woman beside her says her daughter had already been offered to another family. The women begin provoking each other while Rihanna calmly sips her tea, thinking about how Roman, for the past 6 years, had been seen as trash, especially since he was the eldest son, and everyone thought he wouldn't take a throne. But now, with the Dimitri family's situation, there was no one better than him. She then thanks everyone for thinking so highly of her son. But Roman had already been through a lot, so instead of negotiating, she would let Roman be with whoever he loved. And that's why there was no need to discuss marriage any further. However, the women understood this as a challenge to win his heart first. I don't know, but Roman doesn't seem like he's going on this adventure. I think his duels are only on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Flora is desolate, saying she's realized that power is necessary to survive in this world. The truth is, she knows the Lawrence family was defeated by the Barcos, and she thought they'd have a chance if they could hold out until winter. But the reality was completely different, with countless variables she didn't expect. Yet strangely, Ronan predicted everything, dealt with them, and saved the Lawrence family. I thought she was in love, but in reality, she wants to know how to become a person like him. Or maybe not, because she hates Roman Dimitri. He only does things for his own benefit. But she's just curious to know how he became so strong, right, blushing girl? She then decides to get some fresh air and goes outside at night. She's curious now that they no longer have any relationship and the engagement has been broken. This means she has no reason or way to meet Roman again. However, someone calls the girl. But she looks, wow, it's a girl with blue hair. I thought it was going to be our dear Roman or someone announcing his arrival. Whoa, this is Sylvia, one of the girls from the Lawrence family. The scene changes to Flora furiously opening the door, wanting to know why her father is hosting an event for the Dimitris without informing her. He calmly turns around and says he learned a lot after this incident. She had very clearly distinguished right from wrong, he could do nothing. And thanks to her bringing Roman into the war, they managed to win. He didn't want to devalue his daughter anymore, so he would support whatever she desired. And that's why he wasn't going to pressure her to do anything more for the family. She could follow any dream she wanted. However, the damn girl obviously wanted to see Dimitri at the meeting, didn't she? Her face all angry. He then asks why he's sending Sylvia to that meeting. He says it's just personal greed. That's when she realizes that her father is trying to connect Sylvia and Roman to reestablish their relationship. She remains expressionless, but says she understands. However, she's already excited, saying that to make sure this would work, she takes Sylvia to meet Roman. Her father says she doesn't need to go that far to help the family. He said she didn't need to get involved in this anymore. But, angrily, she says she already told him she's going to guide the girl. The scene shifts to the capital of Taros at the Temple of Valhalla. Someone reads a letter and asks if it's true. The son of a noble from an unknown region, 25 years old, killed a 4-star knight in a single strike. The man already knows that if this is a false rumor, a prodigy has been born. This guy is the priest who evaluates people for the Valhalla ranking. The bastard's name is Willis, and he says he'll have to take a look at the boy. The scene shifts to the day the party was supposed to happen that evening. But in the morning, the girls were already all fired up, walking around the city. All of them wearing whatever they had, trying to win over the boy. All shiny, Sylvia says this Dimitri region is darker than she thought. Someone replies that this is expected since it's a land of miners. She says that something like this would be impossible in the capital, where everyone was concerned with basic aesthetics. But to her, this place was far from art. Flora knows that Sylvia was raised by her father in the capital as a merchant, and compares to that place, the Dimitri County really does seem like a farm. A group is coming in their direction, and she asks if they are miners. The schooners pass by her, and she says the dress will get dirty in this place. Another one says that's why there's a problem with these Dimitris. However, someone walks by and she feels something. She's confused, wondering if it was him, our hardworking boy. But then Hans comes running, desperate. He says he can't stop him from going to the mine, but at least he should walk more neatly around town. Our boy apologizes, saying it's enough to clean him up now. The girls observe this discussion and immediately wonder if that's the famous Roman Dimitri. The other girl's eyes are already red, saying he's more handsome than she expected. Wow, she saw his body and even licked her lips. Man, this girl is dangerous. Run, Dimitri, I don't know if you can handle this one. She knows the rumor that the second son will lose his hair position. But what kind of noble family would make their son a miner? From the effort, she's certain that Dimitri will be the successor. To her, Roman's status has only increased because of this. He then says they should introduce themselves to Dimitri before the party. Our boy was taking off his office hat when someone called for him. Obviously, it was Sylvia, asking if he was the Roman. She introduces herself and says she's from the Lawrence family, and she's there to express her gratitude for saving her that time. He really was as incredible as the rumors say. The humble guy just says yes. He calls Hans and tells him to leave. A little while later, Flora is wiping away tears from laughing. With Roman fleeing, Hans says he still has to go to the party and asks him to rest a little. Roman says they criticize the miners, so they don't deserve to spend time with him. The butler then asks how long he will continue disrupting the mines as he has spent countless days without leaving it. To which Roman responds that the root of the Dimitris is the forge. They needed to shed blood and sweat to extract the minerals, melt them in the fire, and turn them into steel. That's how the Dimitris lived their lives. And for him to understand how his people lived, he needed to live the same life. Hans is moved, asking how much the boy has grown. If that's the case, at least he was going to make him the perfect suit. The scene shifts to inside the castle where everyone was practicing. Chris was helping the newbies who were all clumsy. At least after this war, they started trusting Roman even more. Besides that, he handed out some manuals and began training everyone to awaken and evolve their aura. Roman says that all this is so they have the basics of strength, but it's far from enough. That's because he still needed at least an intelligence force. The problem is that for that, they would need people and a lot of money. And the money he has isn't enough for what he's trying to build. He then calls Chris and asks how the training is going. Chris replies that the guys seem extremely motivated and are learning fast. Roman is straightforward and says he'll teach a new sword technique right away. Man, Chris is excited. Roman says it's because, unlike the others, he stood on the front lines. He's about to start building a new world and accept new knowledge. The name of the technique was Simjang. The guy who used this technique in the Marem world became known as the Mountain Blade, and this would be Chris' next step. Later that night, with a little gathering, someone announces that Dimitri was about to enter. The excited girls were all watching, and look how he comes, all noble looking with that foolish face. And of course they blush, right? They swarm around him like bees to honey, wanting to know why he didn't stay to chat with them that morning. He explains that he was very dirty and just wanted to go back to make himself more presentable. But here comes the excited one again, saying that the rumors were true. She couldn't believe that the heir of the noble house was working with the miners. She wonders if things would change significantly if someone like her were his wife. Ronan simply bows and says she flatters him too much. With that, small talk goes here, small talk goes there, drink here, drink there. Sometime later, he's outside on the balcony until someone says he's a great actor. He looks back and you already know who's coming, right, guys? He says that's unexpected. She thought he didn't care much about relationships. He says that normally he really doesn't. However, this party was one that his parents had invited everyone to, so it was different from what he usually does. He then comments that their first meeting was just as unexpected. She says she agrees he's right in a way. Then she asks why he was doing mining work. As a future successor, there was no reason for him to be sent to the mines. But he asks her how she thinks the Lawrences reached their current position. She looks confused, and he says that people believe the Lawrences got to where they are because of abundant soil. However, it's true that the Lawrence family found success through trade. They had good lands, but they were even better at selling products. That's exactly why the Viscount became a merchant in the capital. Flora is impressed that he knew the whole history of her family, something she only recently discovered when she decided to start studying them. However, she asks what that has to do with doing mining work, and then says that the root of the Dimitris lies in mining. If they didn't sweat and work hard all day, the Dimitris would never have gotten to where they are. And that's why he prefers to stay in the mines to understand the people who live there. He believes it's his duty as someone who carries the Dimitri name. He then says he's been there long enough and will take his leave. This crazy girl is constantly impressed, saying she's now made up her mind. Her head, which had been in disarray after the end of the war, was finally clear. She gets excited, saying she knew it was a good decision to meet him. A few days later, Flora left the Lawrence kingdom straight for the capital. It was the first time she had left that small kingdom to venture into the world. The scene shifts to the mining master, Jacob, saying that place is very good. The man in front asks how it's going, and he says it's the same as every day. Big mine, and it never ends. So far, they had only developed the entrance to the mountain. Even if the Dimitri spent dozens of years in that place, they wouldn't be able to finish it all. An old man named Hendrik says he heard that Dimitri was working in the mines and asks how he's doing. The man seems excited as he says Roman's name. A month ago, people were talking about his arrival. Everyone thought he'd come just to pretend he was working and then disappear after a while. A blue-haired man named Morgan says that Lord Dimitri is losing his mind. If he wanted to educate the boy to be the successor, he should have started doing that long ago. However, to this day, the three heirs have only learned about the forge. None of them spent even a second in the mines. Clearly, this was a sign that Lord Dimitri was discriminating against them. One of the guys says he thinks he's exaggerating a bit. However, the man says that the foundation of the Dimitris is iron ore, but the blacksmiths are the ones getting all the glory. And that's why when Roman arrived, he was going to show him how hard this work was. Sometime later, they introduced our boy and announced that he would start working there. Some were sleepy, and everyone was laughing. Roman just stood there observing. The man tells the group that safety comes first, second, and third, and he orders everyone to start working. Roman quickly realized that he was being ignored by everyone, but he decided not to care too much about it. He was there to learn how the mining town of the Dimitris lived. He needed to understand the power they possessed and what he could do for the land. And that's why he was going to learn everything that involved his family. Inside the cave, everyone is mining, saying they need to meet the day's quota. Roman is impressed with how organized they are. They work hard but also have good safety measures. Perhaps it was all this efficiency that gave the metals mined by the Dimitris their fame. The old man comments that not only do they mine properly, but they also perform a perfect process. That's why the steel sold by the Dimitris is recognized by everyone. The Dimitris are one of the few places where they mine, make the steel, and also craft the weapon. That's why this place is considered one of the richest states. With all this, Roman now understands how they have so much money. They've been living this way for decades and probably accumulated much more than he imagined. Then someone says this is no place for chit-chat. The guy in the back says that if he doesn't want to work, he shouldn't bother others. It's Morgan who tells him to leave. They stare at each other. Roman apologizes and says he will get back to work. With that, he grabs the bag and continues collecting the minerals. A week passes. In the mines, it's soup and bread, and Roman is impressed that he's been working there for 7 days and no one has spoken to him. Maybe that was their way of showing that this was their territory. Until Morgan sits in front of him and says he wanted to ask something. He has been watching our boy for a week and is getting curious. He wants to know why Roman is working there. Not even Rodium, who had the highest chance of being the successor, has ever come to the mine. That's why when Roman appeared, he thought the boy was just going to slack off. He's kept an eye on the boy, and Roman has worked much harder than he imagined. Or maybe it could be said that he was working harder than the other miners. The people in the mine are starting to realize that Dimitri wasn't sent to the mine, which leaves them confused as to why he volunteered. Dimitri asks if he wants an idealistic or realistic answer. Morgan responds that he wants both. Our boy then says he'll start with the idealistic answer. The city of the Dimitris was a city of miners, and that's how they made their living. And instead of trying to understand things statistically, he wanted to experience it firsthand. Morgan wants to know if there's really a reason for him to do that. He says yes, because since he carries the Dimitri name, it's his duty. Morgan realizes that this was truly an idealistic answer, the perfect response that someone would want to hear from their leader. Ronan then says the realistic answer is that he's not a master of the Dimitris. Even though his father has infinite wealth, none of it belongs to him. That's why he came to the mine to find out what he can do for the people there, and thus become deserving of a portion of the profits from this place. Morgan starts laughing, and then Joker-like, he says, for God's sake, the son wants to be deserving of his father's wealth. He had never heard anyone say that. He thought Roman was only there to gain some moral standing in the succession battle. But now seeing this, he's sure that Dimitri recognizes the importance of the miners. Excited, he says he'll answer any question the boy has. With that, Morgan finally, sincerely, and truthfully answers the flood of questions from Dimitri. The Dimitri mining system is so large that it could be said to be the biggest on the continent, and the region known as the Infinite Peaks contains an enormous amount of minerals. If they managed to extract all these minerals, they would possess infinite wealth. Morgan also warns about the downside. They aren't very fast at mining there because it's extremely dangerous, so they have to assure safety. The Lord never rushed them and always made sure they worked in the best way possible. Even so, mining remains a dangerous place. He's about to talk about the earthquakes when the ground starts to shake. Immediately, everyone stands up and asks what's happening. One of the men reports that the 8th board had fallen, and it seemed that some miners were buried. They arrive at the scene and wonder what they should do. Man, a hole opened up, and it looks like the guy went through a tunnel. Our Marvel hero says he'll go. However, Morgan refuses, saying that a direct descendant cannot do something like this. They would call the knights and come up with a plan, but Roman says that would be too late. He simply tells Morgan that it's his responsibility. He orders them to get some bandages ready because he's already bringing the injured. With that, he stylishly descends into the tunnel. Sometime later, someone is coming up. It was the lad with the first injured person on his back. Man, that rescue was fast. The boy's already being bandaged. Seeing him treat the man, Morgan is impressed that the boy also knew about first aid. Roman turns and says that he's finished the first aid, and they should take the man to the doctor. If he needs any potion, they should just say, and Roman will buy it. With that, the man is taken away. Ronan takes the opportunity to say that everyone must accept that this is the fate of a miner. No matter how much they prepare, sudden disasters will always happen. But you know it's a difficult path. As someone who bears the Dimitri name, you will help them overcome these hardships. Using any means necessary, and it won't take that long. The scene shifts to his father, asking if he got hurt and why he did something so dangerous. He should know that even as a swordsman with aura, he wouldn't be able to avoid a disaster like that. And because of his lack of care, he almost lost his son. In situations like that, you never risk 2 lives to save one. Ronan says he did what needed to be done, but his father yells. Still, the boy doesn't change his mind and says that if he went back in time, nothing would change. For him, the decision was the right one. However, his father orders him to stop working in the mines as he never asked him to do that anyway. Ronan responds that if he were working in the forge, he knows his father wouldn't stop him. But he's certain he needs to work in the mine to understand the Dimitris, even though they gained fame because of the forge. It was in the mines where most people in the city earned their money. That's why he prefers going to the caves rather than the production rooms. The father asks what he discovered, and our boy says the difficulties they've been facing. He also found out that the Baron cared a lot about the treatment and safety of the workers. However, even so, it was inevitable that sometimes problems would occur. The father says he already knows about this, but just as Roman mentioned, they are unavoidable things. However, Roman says it's possible to fix this by using magical artifacts. The father says that such things would indeed ensure safety, but he wonders how much that would cost. They'd have to spend a lot to protect the entire mine with a bunch of artifacts. Ronan says he understands, but it's still necessary. With the artifacts, production would increase since they wouldn't have to worry so much about safety. The cost of the artifacts would easily pay for itself with the increase in productivity. So clearly, this is an opportunity to make more money. They could also create a specialized group focused on the safety of the mines and ensure that everyone shares in the profits generated there. The father smiles and says that since he's so confident, he wants to know how much the investment will be. Everything Roman has done, he learned in the Maram world from 2 other people. One was a sort of beggar who would listen to everyone's stories to gather information, and the other would involve himself with vulnerable social groups to find out what was going on. That's why Roman chose mining over blacksmithing. And if everything went well, he would now start building the information system he needed so much. However, in this world where he's still weaker, that's not enough. He didn't just want information from the northern region, but from the entire continent. He would need a group that could capture information beyond that place. And for him, there was only one person who fit that role. The scene changes, and it says that after the war, the soldiers discovered something incredible. Chris announces to everyone that from now on, they would learn to use mana. This was a gift from the master, so they should give it their all. For them, a treasure that could teach the use of mana was something priceless. It was so rare that maybe not even a father would teach it to his son. Obviously, because of this, everyone thinks it's a lie, probably just some random technique he found somewhere. Even though they've been loyal to Roman up until now, they're sure they don't deserve such a treasure. Chris then says the technique they were going to learn is called the Azura cultivation technique. And in a distant land, Azura meant the demon of the battlefield. As soon as the men practiced with it for a while, they were already shocked. Their senses had sharpened to the point of feeling the wind touch the sweat droplets on their skin. The Azura technique organized 108 different combat styles. Now with mana activating, they wondered how it was possible for Roman to possess such a treasure. If he got something like that, you would hide it even from his own family. For Lucas, who had already spent a fortune trying to learn some technique, he knew this was the moment his life would change. The scene changes to him apologizing to Roman, saying he prefers to stay by his side. Obviously, our boy wanted to put him in the information gathering group, but Lucas wasn't too keen on that. Lucas said that if he had to run this information guild, he'd have to leave Roman's side. He had sworn his life to Roman and didn't want to be sent away. But our boy seems to think Lucas is acting incredibly well. He then smiles and says he wants to ask something. Why does Lucas think he was taught the Azura cultivation technique? Lucas excitedly says he has no idea. Roman then says that it was the gift they received for swearing loyalty to him. But knowing Lucas, Roman really believed he'd give something like that just because of loyalty. The truth is, this reward was for them going to war and risking their lives for him. But if that's the case, imagine what he'll receive if he completes the task of creating the information guild. Immediately, the men bow, saying they'll obey any order and that this guild will be created yesterday. Roman is excited. At least the guy is calculating and smart. He will be the head of the information guild, which will be called the Ignoble Clan. Sometime later, back at the mine, everyone celebrates Roman's arrival. They approach him and thank him for improving their safety so much. An old man cries, saying that his only son was saved by Roman. Immediately, he falls to the ground, saying he will dedicate the rest of his life to Roman. Roman just thanks him and says he'll take care of him. From that day on, the miners' hearts turned to him, and this atmosphere made the Baron thoughtful. A month had passed since the Barcos War. In a meeting, the people comment that there's no other force in the north comparable to them. Even the groups that supported the Barcos are now eager to ally with the Dimitris. However, as the Baron had ordered, they refused the aid of anyone who had previously sided with the enemy. But how would they handle this? The Baron says that accepting those who once sought to harm you is not generosity, but arrogance in believing you can deal with it. That's why they wouldn't even negotiate with them. You make it clear what happens to those who choose to oppose the Dimitris. One of them then comments that this war made it clear that external power is just as important as internal power. If a large-scale battle had really taken place, many lives could have been lost. That's why the knights suggest they need to increase the size of their army and acquire magical weapons. The Baron knows that nothing brings more security and military power. He then says they have plenty of funds thanks to Master Roman. They spent a lot of money to put protections in place for the miners. But as a result, production increased by 30% in a short period. At the pace things are progressing, it will probably double in the near future. The Baron asks about the artifacts that sometimes break, and another replies that the costs are covered in the same way. Roman's decision to work in the mine on his own turned out to be the right one. He experienced the real problems and created a solution. As a result, people's judgment of Roman continued to improve, and the real issue starts to be discussed. One of the men turns to the Baron and asks how he's going to handle the succession issue. The Baron had been expecting this. The man says he knows Rhodium had been chosen as the next leader a long time ago. However, Master Roman had changed a lot, and with that, the situation has changed too. Since the war with the Barcos, a solution for the mines, and of course how brilliant he is with the sword, the young master's current actions clearly show leadership qualities. And since no official announcement had been made, competition is seen. The succession battle between Rhodium and Roman begins. The father knows that Roman is proving his worth in a very short time. However, Rhodium has been carrying the responsibility of being the successor from a very young age. He doesn't know if it's really a good idea to make them compete for it. He then responds to everyone that he'll analyze the situation. Succession in the Dimitri kingdom works differently. The vassals, the miners, and even the people from the forge have the right to vote. Only with the recognition of these three powers is the successor decided. He then asks for Hans, who appears, saying he's not sure. The father asks again if he believes Roman is worthy of the position of successor. Hans simply says that 3 months ago he would have said no. However, the boy's growth, which she has been watching, shows that he really has the potential to be a successor. The Baron tells Hans to explain, and for some reason it seems like the story assumes we have amnesia. Once again it explains that Roman went to the mines and understood the miners' lives. That's why Hans thinks Roman deserves it. It's so repetitive that I had to summarize it because it made no sense to explain this 10 times. Sometime later, the leader of the mine says he brought the person they had talked about. It was Morgan, and the Baron seems to recognize the name immediately. Morgan then describes the accident that happened when young Master Roman decided to save that man. And Morgan says he was amazed that Roman risked his life to save a worker. At first, he didn't have a favorable impression of the young master. However, he realized how foolish he had been to think that way. To him, Roman was the kind of person who accepted the responsibility of taking care of those under his command. If he had the right to choose, he would make Roman the future successor of the family. For the Baron, although everyone was siding with Roman, he doesn't want to make this decision. The most important piece, the forge, still hasn't given its opinion. Back on the street of blacksmiths, the man enters the shop and says there are a lot of repairs requested by Roman. He asks what to do, and immediately, The man tells him to accept. He stands there with a foolish look, but the old man tells him to hurry up and stop being deaf. The leader of the forge is also named Hendrik, apparently a popular name like James. Hendrik still doesn't like Roman and wanted to refuse this request. However, he heard about what happened in the mine. Now seeing a bunch of items on the ground, he wonders what happened and why everything is so destroyed. And among all the mess was a golden sword that he had no idea about, an extremely sharp point and a proper weight. Even the sheath was a work of art. Something of such quality wasn't seen often even on the street of blacksmiths. He wanted to know where they had gotten something like that. Just by bringing the sword closer to the fire, it started to burn, showing high sensitivity to mana. Any man who was skilled with mana would go crazy for something like this. The blacksmith was proud of his work with steel, but increasing a weapon's sensitivity to mana was a completely different story. You would have to ask where the boy got it. Sometime later, the equipment was all fixed and looking beautiful. Chris wonders why they did everything so quickly. The man who delivered it said that normally that amount would take 2 weeks. But for some reason, Hendrik told them to speed it up. The scene shifts to Hendrik asking where the boy got that sword, or at least who made that sword. Roland's plan was working, and he says he didn't get it from anywhere. Confused, Hendrik asks what he means by that, and our boy reveals that he made it himself. But Hendrik tells him to stop lying, especially since he's standing in front of the master blacksmith of the Dimitris. He sees Roman trying to lie to his face and starts reconsidering the idea that Roman has really changed. However, our boy insists that he made it himself, and its name is Salamander, the only one of its kind on this continent. Hendrik is about to tell Roman to stop lying, but Roman simply says he'll show him. He knows that seeing is believing. He tells Hendrik that he'll convince him by hammering steel. In his isolated forge, Roman comments that he needed a weapon for the war with the Barcos. That's why he stood in front of the forge and relentlessly hammered the steel. Before he realized it, that place had become his sanctuary. He imagined that Hendrik also knew what that feeling was like. Soon, it would be time for the second push. That's why he had recently started forging the sword that would replace Salamandra. What he's about to show is the process that will replace that sword. The boy takes off his shirt, and Hendrik wonders what kind of person forges without any protection. Apparently, Roman really didn't know the basics of blacksmithing. However, Roman swings the first hammer. Obviously, the way they work with steel in this world is completely different from the mirror world. Since few people here knew how to use mana, they focused on working with the metal part of the sword. But in the mirror world, swords were made to maximize mana efficiency. And in a life full of countless battles, Roman had forged countless swords. He goes back to hammering while Hendrik wonders if this was really Roman Dimitri. The strength with which he was hammering, the rhythm, and even the speed. Everything was perfect. Hendrik realizes that bloodlines are something that cannot be lost. A long time passes. Hendrik apologizes and admits that Roman was indeed the one who forged that sword. Our boy smiles. Then he says he'll give Salamandra to him. As he can see, Roman was forging a new sword. He'd also sold one that belonged to Hendrik in the past, and that's why he wanted him to accept Salamandra as a gift. The scene shifts to 3 years ago. In a meeting with the Baron, Hendrik was yelling, saying it was throwing the family's future away to consider Roman as a successor. The Baron remained silent as Hendrik said they had better alternatives. That's when he proposed that the second son, Rodwell, should actually be the successor. Someone correct, focused, and had been learning about blacksmithing from a young age. Back in the present, the Baron thinks to himself that even though 3 years have passed, perhaps Hendrik hadn't changed his mind. But now he's smiling widely, saying that Roman is perfect to be his successor. The Baron asks if he's sure, and glowing with excitement, Hendrik says he would never lie to Romero. He'd seen Roman shedding blood, sweat, and tears in a place where no one else would see him. He reveals the problem he had when he tried to give Roman a bad weapon, because Roman had responded that giving defective equipment was the same as committing murder. That night, Hendrik reflected on this. He realized that Roman had the vision of someone from the Dimitri family. Not only that, he saw the boy working in the forge with his own eyes. He saw him focused on his work, facing the heat of the flames directly in front of the furnace. And as a good blacksmith, he couldn't help but admire that. He could see the boy's talent in the sword he had forged. The Baron watches it all. He had no idea how Roman managed to create something like that. Hendrik then says that, as a master blacksmith, he must reconsider the decision he made 3 years ago. The Baron then reaches for a letter on his desk. It was from Rodwell, who said that he had recently been promoted to Class S at the Karas Academy. From now on, it wouldn't be just theoretical lessons. He would start experiencing life on the battlefield. He would soon graduate with the best marks from the Royal Academy and be a son that Baron could be proud of. He was showing a future for the Dimitri family. Now the Baron is torn. Both boys were extremely talented. But even though Rodwell was considered a genius, he couldn't be compared to the current Roman. Roman was someone strong enough to be recognized throughout the entire Karas kingdom. When Rodwell graduated from the academy and Roman finished his national defense duties, that's when the succession battle would begin. The 2 days pass. Willis, the man from the Valhalla rankings, enters Dimitri territory. Romero introduces himself and asks if he came from the temple. Willis says yes, and that he had heard about someone who might belong in the rankings. Throughout the content of Karas, families of people in the rankings were extremely powerful. The Baron explains that Roman was working in the mines, so he needed a day to rest. so they would meet tomorrow. For now, Willis could take a look around Dimitri territory. Willis agrees and says he'll explore the place. Hans then starts walking with him through the city, explaining about the mining and blacksmithing there, until they hear someone shouting. Looking back, Willis asks if he can observe the train for a while. Hans says yes, but they would have to watch from a distance. One sword clashes against another and Kevin is thrown backward. Pucky asks how long Kevin's body will last if he doesn't learn to defend himself, but Kevin retorts that Pucky can give him lessons after he wins. The two begin to activate their aura and Pucky tells him to come in him. Willis is shocked. The two men practicing in front of him were aura knights. The truth is, among the 30 men Roman recruited, none of them were aura swordsmen. Sometime before, Roman told Pucky that he seemed to have a martial body. Obviously, Pucky was confused as no one knew what that meant. But after just a month of training, they began to understand what Roman had seen in them. And as soon as they saw the opportunity to become stronger than ever, the focus of their training completely shifted. The training that became so intense that it could be said they were risking their lives. Pucky attacks again, telling Kevin to block this. Kevin faces him head-on and manages to defend. The soldier keeps insisting, calling Kevin weird. But at that moment, Kevin's eyes turn red, and he swings his sword right at Pucky's face. Pucky barely manages to defend and is thrown backward. Startled, Pucky asks Kevin if it was really necessary to go that far, but Kevin simply replies that he should take it seriously. If this were a battlefield, Pucky's head would already be rolling on the ground. Willis is completely shocked. This is a remote city, so there shouldn't be so many soldiers with experience in using mana. It's almost as if this place were a miniature version of the Valhalla Empire. However, Willis concludes that these men must be the most promising from the Dimitri family, which is why they receive all the support. Still, it's impressive that they have this kind of power. He already imagined that in the north, the Dimitri family was the strongest, but he had no idea of the scale of their power. The man next to Willis asks if the Dimitris are really a family of miners. Willis says yes, but he's starting to have doubts as the men in front of him are not normal soldiers. He then comments that they must be the Baron's knights. However, Hans responds that they aren't even Dimitri's knights. They weren't affiliated with any organization but are Master Roman's private soldiers. Shocked, Willis grabs Hans by the shoulder and asks how aura soldiers could be treated as simple knights. He questions if they spent a huge amount of money. Hans says he has no idea about that, but if Willis is talking about Kevin and Pucky, they weren't aura knights until recently. Kevin was just an ordinary boy whom Master Roman took an interest in, and Pucky was a rank C mercenary. What changed is that both of them grew stronger by following Roman's teachings. Hans thinks Roman's talent is incredible for seeing people's potential. It's as if he were a blessing to the family. Willis is increasingly shocked, wanting to know who Roman Dimitri really is. The next day, he's already telling himself that he'll finally meet this man. Maybe a hidden dragon who's about to seize a great opportunity. Then someone announces that young Roman is arriving. Willis had seen countless strong people in this world, and just from Roman's walk and the way he looks down, Willis knew that this was the expression of someone who had been used to being strong for a long time. Roman then introduces himself to Willis, who asks if it's true that he defeated Homeros in battle, to which Roman confirms. Willis says it seems Roman has no idea that what he did is extremely unusual. Not only did he defeat rank 49, but someone who had the potential to go far beyond that. What's even stranger is that he defeated someone like that at 25 years old. If that were possible, he'd be considered one of the greatest geniuses in all of Kiro's history. But Roman interrupts saying Willis is just rambling since what he did is logically impossible. So Willis should get straight to the point. Willis says he'll explain the procedure to receive the rank before confirming the truth. That's because rank battles are divided into official and unofficial ones. An official battle is held in front of an observer who has permission from the Valhalla Temple. The rank change happens immediately after as you're verified on the spot. However, an unofficial battle is when a rank is defeated abruptly. In these battles, everyone ranked below that person moves up one spot, while the one who won the battle cannot claim the rank without verification. What happens, though, is that if the person is verified, they receive the lowest position in the rank. Now Roman just needed to prove his strength to become rank 100. Willis explains that the Valhalla Temple only believes what they see with their own eyes, and to verify strength in an unofficial way, they use aura analysis. The test was simple. Roman just needed to pass the minimum threshold they had set, and you would join the rank. They also do this because as soon as someone becomes a rank, they become a target for all others and the rest of the world. However, Roman asks if there's any reason for him to go that far to become a ranked warrior. Willis responds that with this, he has the chance to have his name passed down as a swordsman to the entire world. Many believe that leaving your name in the history of the strongest swordsman was worth the risk. Roman then asks if that were the case, wouldn't it be easier just to defeat a high-rank opponent in an official battle? Willis thinks that this damn guy doesn't know how official battles work. He says it would be easier, yes, but you can't just start an official battle whenever you want. It requires various preparations, and besides, there are no official ranked warriors in the Cairo region. Rowan thinks it's a shame, so they might as well start the test now as he'd at least enter the rankings. Willis explains that the orb will change color in reaction to the mana Roman possesses. Red for 1 star, orange for 2, and yellow for 3. Anything above 4 stars will show a green color. Since Roman defeated a 4-star swordsman, he would at least need a qualification of 3 stars. As he places his hand on the orb, Roman comments that in this world, mana is highly developed. Seeing that they can even develop tools to analyze mana, he wonders what kind of beings mages are. They could be sorcerers like in the Mirim world, or some sort of superhumans who have reached the realm of gods. He needed to be very careful with the variable that mages created in his plans. Willis then tells him to start channeling his mana. Roman tells himself that the logic of the 2 worlds is completely different. He wanted to see what would happen if he infused mana using this world's methods. And instead of concentrating the mana in one part, he decides to explode all around his body. The aura starts pushing everything to the side, and Willis is shocked. The orb, which had been transparent, begins to turn red. Willis knows that the color change happened way too fast. But before he can process it, the orb turns yellow. He's confused. Even a 4-star knight wouldn't be able to change the color that quickly. The orb is stuck on that color, and Roman says it's time to use the methods of the Mirim world. The aura starts pulling back into his body, and the orb turns green. But as soon as the color appears, the orb begins to shatter. Willis can't believe that Roman had broken the device. That orb was the accumulation of knowledge from the greatest minds on the continent. Its durability was guaranteed even with the mana of a 6-star swordsman. Even if someone poured all their mana into it, the orb would survive by dissipating part of it. Roman says that maybe the item is defective, but Willis says that's impossible. He can't give a clear answer because he's never seen anything like this before. However, before it stopped working, he clearly saw the green color. At a minimum, Roman Dimitri was a 4-star swordsman. He wasn't a dragon just beginning to stretch his wings, but a monster already prepared. This would be the emergence of someone with the potential to reach 6 stars in the entire Cairo kingdom. The entire continent of Salamandra would probably be turned upside down. Willis then apologizes. He didn't want to make any hasty judgments, so he would need time to send in the results. He excuses himself. As he leaves, he thinks that he needs to find out more about this Roman Dimitri. As he begins investigating, he discovers that Roman had completely changed recently. He doesn't think it's possible for someone to have changed that much in such a short time. From the destruction of the Blood Gang to the war with the Barcos, Roman dealt with everything perfectly, risking his life to turn his desires into reality. Not only was he a powerful monster, but he had the intellect to execute his plans. The problem with the mana orb was that he concentrated too much aura, causing it to break. But the green color appeared as it should under normal circumstances. Willis then sends a message recommending Roman Dimitri as a recruitment target. The Valhalla Empire isn't just a bunch of combat-loving maniacs. They were also intelligent and knew they needed to use the country's rankings to create more power. The system was perfect since it allowed them to always know who the most promising people in the land were. A man responds that this boy needs to be recruited and his rank should be increased to A. However, as always, this should be done confidentially so other nations wouldn't know about his potential. The process should be extremely natural, making Roman fight for Valhalla. Willis says he understands and will report that the aura orb was defective. Roman would be classified as a 3-star swordsman and would take the 100th ranked position. This alone was enough to stir up trouble throughout the Cairo region. The next day, an announcement shook the entire continent. It was the birth of the youngest ranked warrior in history. Back in the Cairo's capital, someone asks if it's really true. The man says yes, it seems Willis in the Valhalla temple went to meet him and everything was confirmed. However, the detail is that it seems Romero, who was a 4-star knight, lost before he could show his true power. The man is speaking with Marcus Benedict, an authority in the central government. He asks how old the boy is, and the man responds that he's 25. Benedict then says that being a 3-star swordsman at 25 years old shows that an incredible person is emerging in that region. He wanted to know what the other powers were doing. The man explains that there are 2 empires moving quickly. It seems Kairos, Kronos, and Valhalla are 3 different countries on the same continent of Salamandra. I think that's it. And now everyone wants the protagonist. Benedict is fuming, wondering why those damn people contacted the boy before he did. Currently, Cairo is divided into 4 factions. Actually, is Cairo the continent itself or just a confusing plot point? There's the group that supports the king of Cairo, the aristocracy that supports this Benedict, the people from Kronos, and the people from Valhalla, which are factions influenced by foreigners. The old man immediately says they need to send someone because they can't lose Dimitri to another faction, especially to prevent the royal faction from buying him at any cost. A scene shifts to the western battlefront. The kingdom of Cairo has a front against Kronos in the west and another in the south against Hector. The empire of Kronos, one of the largest on this continent, gave birth to Emperor Alexandro, and that's why they want Cairo to become a nation subjugated to them and have been attacking for many years. Cairo's soldiers constantly die on the battlefield. Because of this, many people within Cairo's territory have already surrendered to Kronos, and factions that support Kronos taking over the country have started to organize. Observing a field full of dead bodies, someone seems to be angry at the empire. He says he hates not even being able to give a proper funeral to those who fought for their country. Rodion Dimitri, Roman's brother, says he's used to it as it's not the first time he's done this. The man, however, responds that the front lines are too atrocious. He wants to quit the academy and return to his homeland. Rodium just ignores him and sets the bodies on fire. That was the reality of a small, weak country like theirs. Not a single day was peaceful on the Western Front as they wanted to destroy all of Caro's forces. The man then asks if Rodium has heard that his brother became ranked. Rodium is thoughtful for a moment. He can't believe that his former brother became a 3-star swordsman, and it's impossible that it's the same person. He tells the man that it must just be a rumor, as the person he knows can't even take care of himself. However, it was only a matter of time before the truth would come out. The scene shifts to another place where someone says the young master has a visitor. On the couch, a man says he serves the majesty of the kingdom of Kiro. He's in Dimitri territory to appoint Roman Dimitri as a royal knight. Now, everyone had their eyes on the hidden dragon in the northern region, and the 4 factions of the empire begin to make their moves. A royal knight is a knight who serves the royal family, and the story says that it's the greatest honor allowed to a living knight in this world. The man says that the position being offered to Roman is an unprecedented event. If you went to the central kingdom now and swore loyalty to the majesty, you could become a knight without going through a single test. However, Roman simply asks if that's all. The man asks if, by chance, he's rejecting the offer. Our boy replies that it's obvious that he is. His wife, as the eldest son of the Dimitris, is already perfect, so why would he go to the capital to take on that position? The man tries to explain that Roman would receive a mansion in the capital, and the Dimitri family would gain many merits. But Roman simply asks if that's the best the royal family can offer. The man is a bit confused, as for many, that would be enough. He explains that Roman is only being given this chance because the king sees potential in his future. A new position for the family, a role as a royal knight, and even a mansion in the capital. These were rewards that his current standing didn't even deserve. However, the protagonist responds that the man must be misunderstanding things. The Viscount of House Gregorio had visited him 5 days ago. They also offered mansions in the capital, but with far more imaginable treasures and lands. They even wanted to tie their bloodlines through a political marriage. The man already knows that these are the factions supporting the reign of Kronos. Rhoda then says that 3 days ago, people from House Denver also visited, saying they wanted to sponsor him. And last night, he met someone from House Benedict. They offered something even more exceptional. 3 times the conditions offered by any other house. And in less than a month, they promised to advance the Dimitri family to the rank of Viscount. The man realizes they are far behind everyone else, but he shouts, asking if there's any way to make Roman choose them. The people who made these offers to him were insurgents trying to devour the kingdom. It's only thanks to the royal family's knights that this entire place hasn't turned into a rebellion. However, even part of the royal authority was beginning to fade. He knows that Cairo is currently a small and weak nation, and he admits that in the current position, the only thing worthwhile is the role of royal knight. But he begs Roman to support his majesty, the current king. Roman remembers going through similar situations in his past life. He informs the man that none of the 4 offers interest him, which is why he plans to reject them all. Furthermore, he's not ready to give up on his plans just yet. The man becomes hopeful, saying that it seems there's still a chance. Roman then tells him to return for the day, and the man understands. He says he'll be eagerly waiting for the day when Roman swears loyalty to the majesty. 4 offers and 4 rejections. Roman had no intention of swearing loyalty to any power. They would become his enemies in the future, no matter what he did. That's why he left the possibility of future loyalty open with all the factions. Sometime later during training, someone greets him. It's a man named Mackin, another member of Valhalla's intelligence unit. Roman already noticed that Mackin was wearing Dimitri's servant's clothing and asks him what he wants. As far as Roman knows, they had already expressed their intentions through House Denver a few days ago. Mackin apologizes for visiting him in such a disrespectful manner. He explains that during the previous conversation, he had to be formal because there were many people watching. However, he now wanted Roman to consider the offer he was going to make as it reflects Valhalla's true intentions. Their group seemed to admire Roman's potential. The problem is that nationality is not something easily resolved, and Mackin imagines that Roman would want to leave the Dimitris as they have an incredible amount of wealth. However, it would offer him the title of Viscount, fertile lands, and even more connected minds. That way, even with the new reign, he could maintain the Dimitri family's history as blacksmiths. Roman expected such an unusual offer. Mackin also says they offered the greatest thing to his swordsman, the chance to become even stronger. It would allow access to Valhalla's first-class treasure vault. Roman knows that's where they keep secret techniques and ancestral records. Above Class 1, only the special items remain, meaning you'd have access to nearly everything. Mackin says that soon enough Valhalla will conquer the entire territory where Roman now resides. Staying in Cairo was a direct path to death. Roman should go to Valhalla and begin sowing a glorious future. Mackin is confident in the offer. Not only are the rewards sufficient, but there's even a level of threat implied. If Roman were smart, he would accept it on the spot. But of course, Roman rejects it, leaving Mackin devastated and asking if Roman is serious. Roman says he's not rejecting the offer because it's bad or out of loyalty to the king. Instead, it's because he's been receiving many offers lately. The boy is clever and knows this is the easiest way to raise his value without making the decision. He has received offers from the royal knights Marcus Benedict, Count Gregor, and Count Denver. All of them have made very generous offers, which is why he isn't ready to make a definitive choice about his path. He needs time to assess each situation and determine if risking his life for any of these options is worthwhile. What Roman was doing was portraying himself as a loyal person. This made everyone view him as someone difficult to recruit. However, it also showed that he would be loyal to the side he ultimately chose. Maka became intrigued, not realizing he had fallen into Roman's trap. He then says he doesn't know how Roman will prove Valhalla's intentions, but they won't wait long. That's why he begged Roman to give a response as soon as possible. Roman simply says he understood. Before leaving, Makin says he'll give Roman a gift to establish a connection between them and warns him to start being cautious about the southern borders. That region was no different from a bomb about to explode at any moment. The scene shifts to Roman's family, where Senna asks their father if Roman is really going to do this. Roman says he will return safely, so they don't need to worry. His mother tells the Baron not to worry, as it's not like Roman is being sent to the Eastern Front. He's heading to the southern border, which is considered safer. He will surely return safely. Romero says he understands, but it's inevitable for a father to worry about his son. Roman then calls for his group, who shout, "Yes, sir." Our boy was on his way to the southern front. Upon arriving in the city, he tells his men that today they will rest and they will train as soon as the sun rises tomorrow. The group is excited, as Roman at least rented some houses for them to sleep in. Usually, other nobles would have their armies sleep in tents. Sometime later, Roman was reading something when he heard shouting. He descended the stairs and found someone yelling, asking if they knew who he was. The man introduced himself as the first and only son of House Albert. His name was Henry Albert. The letter Roman had been reading before came from Benedict. It said that they didn't want someone who would become a part of them to suffer and ruin their health in a place like that. That's why they pulled some strings to have Roman sent to the south instead of the Eastern Front. Roman didn't need to worry, as House Benedict would always be waiting for him. Their attempts had been intensifying over the past few months. Clearly, the aristocracy in the city didn't want to lose him. There was no better talent than Roman to oppose the royal knights. He was now at the southern front. The only problem is that, contrary to what the Marquis believes, the intelligence officer from Valhalla mentioned that something's about to happen. Whatever it was, Roman was about to find out. Back to the moment when Henry introduces himself. He tells Chris that he's a descendant of one of the most prestigious families in Cairo, so it didn't take much to speak with him. That's when Roman arrives and asks what's going on. Chris explains that the fat guy wants them to leave because he wants to stay in the inn. However, Chris had already explained that they had rented all the rooms, but the man kept insisting. But Roman, the king of politics, already knows that the Albert family was famous in the past, but it's no longer a prestigious family. Even if it were, he wouldn't care. He then asks the fat man why they should leave. At that moment, Albert asks if Roman is the leader of these guys. Roman replies that he is. Henry then tells him not to interfere, as it seems they are both headed to the southern front. He gives Roman 10 minutes to remove this pile of trash from the place and disappear from his sight. Roman begins to understand how the Dimitris are treated when they're far from the north. However, he responds that he's not going to leave. He starts to draw on his sword, saying there's an easy way to solve this situation. He then tells Albert to draw his sword too. If Albert wins, Roman will leave. The fat man seems angry, but then someone gets scared and tells him to stop. The man in front of him is Roman Dimitri, the boy who recently became the youngest ranked warrior in history. Albert freezes upon hearing Roman's name. The youngest ranked warrior of the Cairo Empire and the one who ended the Barkville War. Now known as a heartless demon who even killed the son of those people. The fat man stands still, certain that if he draws his sword, he'll be dead. He then says he forgot that he has something very important to take care of. It would be best to consider this situation resolved as a small mistake on his part. He'd love to punish Roman for the disrespect he showed to House Albert. Before he can finish speaking, Roman is already in front of him, staring him. The fat man runs away at full speed. Roman just watches how things work in the south. That day, 3 similar incidents occurred. Everyone who came to evict him from the inn fled as soon as they heard Roman's name. The girl at the bar explains that these kinds of petty disputes are common in the southern front, because they have a friendly relationship with the Hector continent and have suffered many attacks. That's why children trying to avoid military service come here as a solution. It was the perfect place for nobles to fulfill their duties without risking much. But looking at the map, Roman knows that 48 days ago, Hector's continent had its eyes on the southern front. It was true shortly after, but 3 other analyses seem to have been made. He's not sure if they're really preparing for war. However, just this analysis and the information from Valhalla already show that this place is far from a sanctuary. The madman starts laughing at the fun of war. He was eager for the air to fill with the smell of blood. The next day, a man introduces himself as Bale Frank, a commander of the southern front. He would conduct basic training for all those being sent to the region. While he gives a speech about serving the empire, most of the men are more asleep than paying attention. During his speech, he mentions forgetting any status they had before, as here they are just soldiers completing their military service. Anyone who disrespects the rules will be sent to the Eastern Front as punishment. Roman thinks it's stupid that the punishment for breaking the rules is being sent to another battlefield, since it makes no difference. That is until he notices the men becoming serious when they hear this. Later, the group is dispatched. Then someone informs Roman that the commander wants to speak with him. A while later, smiling broadly, Frank asks if Roman is living comfortably in the South. Roman simply says there's no problem, and Frank tells him to feel at home. He says he has no idea how happy he was to hear that Roman was coming to this place. Roman Dimitri, the youngest ranked warrior in history, and considered the hidden dragon. Frank then says he called Roman to confirm something. He asks if it's true that Marquis Benedict pulled so strings to have Roman sent to the South. Roman says it's true, but he didn't ask Benedict to do it. It just happened. Frank immediately understands that this was, in a way, an investment from Benedict. Perhaps if Frank managed to connect with Roman, he'd also have a chance to enter the central government. Baek then says he'll be direct. You want to make a good impression with the Marquis. The Southern Front wasn't bad, but it was nothing compared to the luxurious life of a member of the central government. That's why he would do his absolute best to accommodate Roman while he was there. What he wanted in return was for Roman to tell the Viscount that Baek Frank made his life easy in that region. Roman was excited that at least this guy was 100% honest and said everything you wanted. There was no reason to refuse help when he had no idea what was about to happen. As soon as he opens the door, someone yells at him, calling him the son of a very fine lady. It's Henry again, saying that Roman messed with the wrong house because this is linked to the Franks. And Baek Frank, who is the commander of the southern training camp, is actually Henry's uncle. Roman simply asks what Henry expects him to do with that information. Meanwhile, Henry continues threatening, saying that Roman doesn't realize how much trouble he's in. Henry then enters the room and declares that now Roman will see how hard his life will become. He enters and tells his uncle that his life was threatened by a man from a house with only a baron title. Outraged, Baek Frank immediately asks who it was. Whoever it was would get a beating for messing with the boy. But as soon as he steps outside and sees that it's Roman, Baek slaps his nephew in the face. Henry's left devastated, not understanding what just happened. The relationship between Baek and Henry had always been very good. The two liked each other and shared many laughs. Aside from his parents, Baek was the closest person who had listened to him since he was very young. One could say that there were times when Henry liked his uncle Baek more than his own parents. However, now he was lying on a desolate ground, asking his uncle what that was all about. His uncle quickly explained that the other person was Roman Dimitri, who had the support of the Marquis and infinite potential. He then turned to the boy and apologized. He said he should have educated him better and promised to apologize on his behalf. Roman said it was all right and that he would let it slide since Baek was being so polite. With that, he asked for permission to leave, and the man thanked him. The next moment, he was already berating Henry, asking who he thought he was to go against someone supported by Marquis Benedict. Henry, however, devastated, asked why he had to be beaten for it. Baek approached and said that Henry needed to grow up. If he kept acting like this in the Albert estate, he wouldn't be able to protect the boy. However, he had a crazy idea. He said that Roman probably had a wrong impression of the Alberts now, and because of that, Henry would always stay close to Roman to try to get closer to him. His job was to become Roman's friend no matter what. If he didn't, he would be sent to the Eastern Front. In his private room, Roman remarked that the guy was really trying hard. However, a person who opens up their ambitions to everyone is easy to manipulate. At least life in the southern camp wouldn't be too bad. The scene shifts to 3 years ago. A man looks at some papers and says he can't believe he has to play games with the nobles. This man is the general of the South, and his name is McBurney. He was a veteran of the Eastern Front who had volunteered purely out of loyalty to the king. Through hundreds of battles over 10 years, he protected Cairo. Coming from humble origins, he had risen to lead hundreds of men. However, a single cut was enough to end it all. In a battle to protect the Eastern Front, he lost the arm that held his sword. At that moment, the greatest pain of all was knowing that he could no longer be a warrior. In a meeting, they told him that in recognition of all he had done, he would be sent as an instructor to the South. He would be out of the battlefield, but would still train those who would protect Cairo. Though it was a harsh option, McBurney had to accept reality. When he arrived in the South, he discovered that their training methods were a total mess. Everyone did the same exercises, which were basically useless. Not to mention that most nobles didn't even bother to participate. Initially, he wanted to implement rigorous training, starting with the basics for each person. However, it was pointless, as no one was willing to train. He kept asking himself what the meaning of his presence there was. At the very least, it would have been nice if they pretended to be training. The guys outside just talked about visiting the houses of the women who sold that. McBurney walked past them without saying a word. He couldn't believe there were people so relaxed on the front lines. At that moment, he was already tired of it all. Then he saw the group standing in front of him. Obviously, it was Chris, Kevin, Pucky, and the rest of Roman's team. McBurney was surprised that they even had a commander. Maybe he didn't know how things worked in the southern camp. He then approached Roman and told him that in the South, no noble was required to train. If Roman wanted, he could relax in the shade with the others. Roman asked if he was saying that because of the guys next to him. McBurney looked and said yes. However, Roman simply stated that an enemy attack doesn't differentiate between a noble and an ordinary citizen. Furthermore, even if a commander only planned to coordinate the troops, they still needed to have good physical ability. That's why, in his opinion, it was natural for someone in a position of authority to participate in any training. McBurney didn't expect that. The boy was 100% determined. Roman then told him to stop with a fake smile because he would follow any training regardless of his status. It was the first time McBurney had seen a noble say they would commit to their training. He knew that people risked their lives for those who recognized them. He was thinking of making this training easier, but he wasn't going to do that anymore. At the very least, he would give his best effort in the next 3 weeks. He then announced that the first week would consist of physical training. With McBurney's decision, the training hell began. The first task was to run as fast as possible with a heavy load on their backs. This was to get them used to a battlefield where they couldn't rest for a second. They would do this route every day, rain or shine, no matter what happened. However, the others from different families could barely keep up with the boys ahead. Sometime later during sword practice, McBurney stated that war is something you never know when it will end. That's why they would continue practicing without knowing when they would stop, and anyone who gave up early would have to train twice as hard afterward. At nights, someone complained that they were exhausted and finally couldn't rest. His idea of the easy camp was a complete lie thanks to certain people. He then turned to the group next to him and told them to take it easy because they were forcing everyone else to work harder. They were just soldiers who had been sent there and would have never prepared for this. If they hadn't been doing this for as long as the others, they would have kept up. However, Carterson Tremblone asked how long these guys had been training. Startled, the man said they had only been training for a year, while Henderson's group had clearly been training for 10. Carterson corrected him, saying they'd only started training 3 months ago. He told the man to stop making excuses, because the truth was he simply hadn't given his best effort. We didn't see the day Henderson discovered there would be soldier recruitment. That's when he decided to become one of Roman's subordinates. Since it was just to serve Roman, he was sure he wouldn't need incredible qualifications. However, the truth was, this was his biggest disillusionment. Seeing veteran mercenaries like Lucas and Pookie at the registration made him realize the offer wasn't that easy after all. At that moment, Henderson realized he was a herbivore surrounded by beasts, and he began to wonder if he'd really make it. He told Chris that he didn't believe he had the right to serve Lord Roman. Chris asked why, and Henderson said he was nothing more than a novice who barely knew how to wield a sword. In truth, he had lived as a farmer until now and might have misjudged himself, thinking he could pass Roman's test. The blonde guy asked if he was going to give up because he was behind compared to the others, and Henderson said yes. However, he explained that when he first saw Kevin, he was nothing but a kid with anger in his eyes. He couldn't understand why Roman accepted that common boy. Anyone who saw Kevin now knows what happened. In a short time, Kevin became a warrior no one could ignore. On the first day, he saw Roman. Henderson had foolishly challenged him and of course was defeated. At that moment, he thought he was strong, until he realized he was just a fraud at the bottom of the well. That's why he had to understand that if the Lord chose him as his soldier, even if he was pathetic at that moment, it showed he had the potential to grow just like he and Kevin had grown. The person he followed was someone who could make that a reality. Henderson said he didn't have the courage to believe in himself. However, he was chosen among all the others who applied. He still had no idea how a farmer like him could become strong, but he was going to trust Roman's choice and give his best in all the training. From that day on, Henderson's life began to change. In the past few months, he gave his all in training, no matter what was asked of him. Even if he was on the verge of vomiting or fainting, he kept trying to keep up with his comrades. And that's what resulted in the strong body he has now. He then asked the others what they thought war was and why they were complaining about others preparing when their lives were at stake. Instead of recognizing their weaknesses, they were trying to drag others down to their low level. That's why he had no reason to respond to that senseless request. The man stood there saying nothing with his friends looking like fools. And Henderson, like a Chica Chad, walked away, calling them pathetic. Roland's soldiers already had their minds set on the war ahead. The extreme training continued, and even as the difficulty increased day by day, they remained strong. However, under a tree, the nobles said they didn't know why the others were going to such lengths. It would be different if they were on the eastern battlefield, but here it was easy to relax. One of them said that the group was working so hard because they came from common families. No one would recognize the Dimitri household if they didn't go so far. They all laughed, while Henry wondered how he could get close to someone like that. Roman didn't seem to realize how important it was to have a good relationship with the other nobles. That for Henry was the big problem with these nobles from unknown places. However, he didn't care about that, as he believed things would work out somehow. The scene shifts to a man named Jackson, passing along some information about what he saw. He was the captain of the scouts, and he said they had infiltrated Kiro's defensive lines 48 times. He reports to the king that all of Kiro's forces seem to be concentrated in the east, as that's where they are being attacked by Kronos. This is why conquering the southern front shouldn't be a problem. The kingdom of Hector was once a power on par with Kronos. They grew extremely fast thanks to their national defenses, but they suffered a defeat against Valhalla and fell into ruin. With this, Hector's power dropped to the same level as Kiro, and now they must be cautious with every move they make in the empire. A worried voice asks the father if he can say something. It's the Prince Edwin, who says their empire has been suffering from poor harvests for the past 5 years. The money they borrowed from the Golden Bank is becoming impossible to repay because of the interest. At this rate, the Hector Empire will lose any respect it still holds in these lands. The king says it's not as if he's unaware of all this. The son mentions that after their defeat, they distanced themselves from war, but this could change since they have been preparing for the last year. For their desperate citizens and for the sake of the kingdom itself, they needed to make a decision. The father fears the word war differently from his son. He then asks Edwin if he's confident, and Edwin responds that he wouldn't bring this up if he weren't. The father then declares that from this moment on, he grants executive authority to his son. From this point forward, Edwin will be in charge of everything related to the war. Edwin simply thanks him and says he is at the king's service. Meanwhile, at the Southern Front, they had just finished the 3 weeks of training. Balefranc smiles and says that from today onward, they will be part of the 5th line of defense. This is the place where most nobles like to go because it's the most peaceful. Roman simply thanks him. Frank responds that there's no need to thank him and to just ask if he needs anything.